Hey guys and girls, how's it going? So here is my second Witcher video. This one is on the main story of The Witcher 2. Now there are 5 key choices from the second game that can change the overall storyline quite significantly. As these are pretty crucial, I'll be highlighting and explaining the choices available and the decisions I made, plus the consequences when we get to them. As some of you may already know, CD Projekt Red have included a way for you to incorporate these decisions into The Witcher 3, and they have said that this will be done through an interrogation scene at the start of the third game. Okay, so let's get into the main storyline. So The Witcher 2 is set 1 month after the end of the first game. Now the game starts with Geralt imprisoned in La Valette dungeon. After receiving a beating from the guards, he is interrogated by a guy called Vernon Roche. Now, Vernon Roche is the commander of the Blue Stripes, and these are basically Temeria's special forces. Now, we learn very quickly early on that Geralt has been arrested for the murder of King Foltest, and during the course of the prologue, he pretty much recounts the events of the battle leading to Foltest's death in an attempt to prove his innocence. Now, the flashback starts with Geralt waking up in a tent next to a very naked Triss Merigold. Now, they are interrupted by a very flustered soldier, and Geralt is summoned to Foltest's side as his own personal Witcher bodyguard and lucky charm during the battle. Now, attacking the castle in a siege tower, Geralt storms the castle wall, fighting his way through La Valette knights while obviously continually protecting the king's back. The king and Foltest then face a guy called Aryan La Valette, and this is where your first choice will happen. Geralt sneaks past the soldiers and faces Aryan alone, and it is here that he has a choice. Kill Aryan by challenging him to a duel, kill Aryan's guards and then kill Aryan himself, or spare his life. Now, to explain who Aryan La Valette is a noble youth who is very honourable and is effectively fighting King Foltest to protect the honour of his mother and his siblings. Now, Foltest had actually slept with his mother, who had given birth to 2 bastard children, and then was pretty much abandoned and her honour besmirched and just ruined by these events. Now, Aryan is very angry at Foltest, and he's angry that Foltest is trying to claim these 2 children now as his heirs, because, you know, Foltest has no longer has any heirs as a result of Princess Ada dying. Now, feeling sympathetic to Aryan, my Geralt pretty much took pity on him and convinced him to surrender, thus saving his own life and that of his soldiers. Now, as Geralt and Vernon Roche and the king make their way to the monastery, which is where the children are being kept safe, they are unexpectedly attacked by a dragon. This separates Roche from Geralt and Foltest, and from this point on, Geralt basically tells how the king died. So Geralt helps carry the king to safety, and he hurts the dragon with his silver sword, which causes the dragon to fly off, but sadly Geralt loses his sword in the process. They then find the children, who is being protected by a blind monk. Now, Foltest embraces his children, and Geralt looks away, I think a little embarrassed, and he just looks away into a window, trying to give the king a bit of privacy, as he tries to reconnect with his children. Unfortunately, Geralt notices too late that the monk is not what he appears, and as he runs towards the king, he fails to stop the assassin who slits Foltest's throat. The assassin then removes his disguise, revealing himself to be a witcher, and he then jumps out of the window and escapes with the help of a group of Scoia'tael in a boat. Geralt is left hunched over the dead body of King Foltest, holding a bloody sword, and of course he's then arrested and thrown into prison, and the flashback pretty much ends there. After hearing Geralt's story, Vernon ultimately believes his innocence and agrees to help Geralt escape and find the true Kingslayer. Roche offers Geralt some food and drink to sort of replenish his energy, and this actually triggers a flashback as Geralt regains some of his lost memory. Now, just so you guys know, within this video, I'm not going to really talk about these flashbacks in too much detail. I am actually planning to sort of incorporate all of these flashbacks in a separate video where I'm going to compile them together and sort of make a compilation video so you guys will be able to watch them and get an idea of Geralt's memory and his past and what he sort of learns or remembers during the course of The Witcher 2. Now, Roach leaves Geralt with a key, and using this, Geralt knocks his 2 guards unconscious, and he escapes the prison by sort of sneaking through the prison itself and knocking out any guards that he comes across. Now, before leaving the prison, he actually does find and help Aryan Lavalette to escape. Now, Aryan, before escaping, decides to torch the prison. He burns it down. This actually provides a distraction for Geralt, who's able to use this to escape out to the docks, where he's able to get onto a boat with Triss and Roach and escape to Meria. And that is pretty much the end of the prologue. In Chapter 1, Vernon, Roach, Triss and Geralt head to Flotsam, following a lead that the assassin has been spotted there and is being helped by a local Scoia'tael leader, a guy called Iorveth. Now, landing on the beaches near Flotsam, they immediately run into Iorveth, and it becomes very clear very quickly that there is no love lost between Iorveth and Roach. Now, of course, that makes sense. As the commander of the Temerian Special Forces, Roach has extensive experience in fighting against and killing the Scoia'tael and all non-human terrorists as he sees them. Iorveth, on the other hand, is a very strong-willed rebel and could be really considered the Malcolm X of the Scoia'tael. He is willing to kill and take whatever drastic actions needed to achieve his goals of attaining the freedom and equal rights for all non-humans. Geralt talks to Iorveth to distract him while Triss readies a spell. Now, the spell sadly backfires and Iorveth replies with a hail of arrows, which Triss is able to deflect using a protective bubble which she places around them, but not before collapsing from the effort. Now, Roach carries her to safety while Geralt follows, picking off any Scoia'tael who enter the bubble along the way. The 3 of them do manage to escape Iorveth and his archers, and they arrive in Flotsam unscathed, thankfully, though surprised to see a public execution taking place, and even more shocked to see Dandelion and Zoltan Chive about to be hung. Now, Geralt obviously steps in because they're his best friends, and he fights the guards and the executioner and manages to convince the commandant of the town, a guy called Loredo, to release his friends in exchange for his Witcher services. Loredo agrees, telling Geralt to meet him at night, and Geralt, Triss, Zoltan and Dandelion basically catch up over a few pints of ale at the local inn. Now, while telling tales and catching up and having a laugh, basically, they are interrupted by a villager who storms into the inn, screaming at people to run away from a monstrous beast that's attacking the village. Geralt rushes outside to witness a sorceress fighting a Kayran. Now, this is a beast that kind of looks like a kraken. The monster flees, and Triss introduces Geralt to the sorceress, who is called Sheila de Tanzaville. Now, she's a powerful sorceress and also an advisor to Queen Zulika of Kovir. Geralt is asked by a town official to take on a contract to kill the Kayran, which he accepts, and he agrees to work with Sheila to, destroy, to kill the monster, which is basically preventing any trade happening down the Pontar, down the river. Now, following a lead, they seek the help of a guy called Cedric. Now, he's an elf and an ex-Scoia'tael, and he points Geralt in the direction of the Kayran's lair, and Triss learns from testing the beast's mucus that it has been created by magic and is highly poisonous. With this knowledge, Geralt begins by creating an antidote to the poison using some Ostmerk that he found in an elven ruin, and that's a big part of being a witch, sort of preparing for a fight and finding the monster's weakness and its strength, and obviously drinking potions to prepare yourself for it. So he does what any good witcher does, basically. And that now that he's ready, with Sheila de Tanzaville, he actually faces off against the Kayran, and through a combination of potions, signs, and sword skill, slays the beast and collects his reward. Now interested in what the Commandant needs, he actually goes to Laredo's house at night and unexpectedly runs into Roach, who also wants to talk to the Commandant. Using Roach as a distraction, Geralt sneaks into the Commandant's house to speak to him. Laredo reveals his concerns about the neighbouring Scoia'tael and believes that Iorveth will attack soon to free the non-human prisoners which are being held in his prison barge. He asks Geralt to use his connections with Zoltan Chive, a known supporter of the Scoia'tael, to find out what Iorveth plans. Now, before speaking to Zoltan, Triss and Geralt decide to sneak into the prison barge to interrogate the prisoner. They speak to Iorveth's right-hand man, a guy called Kieran, I think I said that right, who, with some persuasion, reveals that the Kingslayer, who is actually a guy called Letho, betrayed him and intends to kill Iorveth, betraying the Scoia'tael leader. He asks Geralt to warn Iorveth before passing out. Now, this whole conversation again triggers a flashback, and Geralt remembers more of his past, including a sorceress who tried to save his life called Yennefer. Now, actually, just so you guys know, Yennefer is a pretty big character. She's actually the love of Geralt's life, though they do have a rocky relationship. She's Triss's friend, maybe best friend, and she's also a mother figure to Ciri. Now, Ciri is another major character that's going to be in the third game that Geralt is trying to find throughout the course of the game. Ciri is more like a daughter to Geralt and also obviously a daughter to Yennefer. So that's just to give you guys a little bit of information so you kind of know that these are pretty important characters for the third game. Now, despite sort of remembering, Yennefer, Geralt's memory is still vague and he doesn't remember much of her in detail, but he wants to desperately. And Triss suggests using a Rose of Remembrance from an ancient elven ruin, which is renowned for having amazing regenerative powers. And they find the roses, and after a brief skirmish with thugs, fall into an ancient chamber, which seems to have a conveniently placed hot spring bath that Triss and Geralt clearly can't resist taking advantage of. Now, after some quality time, Triss takes a rose and informs Geralt it will take a few days to make a potion. Now, Geralt leaves Triss and meets up with Zoltan, who arranges a meeting with Iorveth. Telling him of Letho's planned betrayal, he is at first skeptical, but then agrees to test a theory by confronting Letho, pretending to be Geralt's prisoner. Now, as Geralt leaves Iorveth to Letho's location, he asks him about his aims and motivations, and Iorveth reveals that he killed kings like Foltest and Demovid, as he felt that these monarchs were corrupt and needed to be purged. He then goes on to hint that he actually knows somebody in the east that he thinks would be a much better monarch, but at this point he doesn't say who. Now, meeting Letho by the Elven Runes, he admits to his betrayal and reveals to Geralt that the Witcher had once saved his life, and he actually knew him very well. Now, the scene is abruptly interrupted as Vernon Roche attacks with his soldiers, and it is here that we make our crucial second choice. Now, we must choose whether to side with Iorveth or with Vernon Roche. Now, the decision that you make at this point completely changes the direction of the storyline, as you can split off into two completely separate paths. Now, I actually decided to side with Iorveth, as I ultimately agreed with his ideals of equality between humans and non-humans, and I was curious about this person that he mentioned in the East, and I also had a grudging respect for the rebel and his determination to change things for the better. Now, if you are interested in Roche's path, I will post a link in the description below to a playthrough that shows that storyline plot. So the remainder of the story, of course, will be just entirely on Iorveth's path. Now, to continue, while Iorveth fought Roche, Geralt actually fights Letho, who is a very powerful foe, pretty much equal in strength and skill. Letho overpowers Geralt briefly and reveals his intent to kidnap Triss Merigold and use her to teleport him to Aedirn. Now, Geralt rushes to Flotsam to save Triss, only to find himself too late. Geralt meets with Iorveth and tells him Letho has escaped. Iorveth is not happy, and he does agree though to help the Witcher and travel to Aedirn and the town of Vergen to track down Letho and rescue Triss. Sneaking into Flotsam, they steal the prison barge and sail to Aedirn, and that is the end of chapter 1. The beginning of chapter 2 starts with a negotiation between King Henselt of Kaedwen and Prince Stennis and the warrior Saskia of Aedirn. Now, Saskia is known as the Virgin of Aedirn and a slayer of dragons, and she is a famous hero within the region. Now, both sides are on the brink of war and they're arguing over land, with Henselt wanting to expand his territory and Stennis insisting that he'll protect it, warning Henselt to avoid conflict at all costs. The talks pretty much go south and fighting breaks out. Now, Henselt, in the midst of the fighting, kills a monk by an ancient shrine, and this seems to trigger a curse. Now, just as Dandelion, Zoltan, Geralt and Iorveth arrive, they witness the curse as the sun goes dark. They fight their way to Saskia and Prince Stennis. Henselt and Síle have actually already escaped through a portal, and they're left, to fight the wraiths that appear. All seems lost until a mysterious glowing golden owl appears, sheltering them from the wraiths and providing safe passage through the mist. Once safe, the owl turns into Philippa Eilhart, a powerful sorceress and aide to Saskia. Now, traveling to Vergen, a dwarven city, Saskia reveals it to be a safe haven for all outcasts, including humans and non-humans. Now, Geralt is summoned to the council meeting where they decide to employ the help of the Witcher and Philippa to lift the curse, and Philippa reveals that in order to do this, they actually need to learn the story of a battle that took place there 3 years earlier, where Kaedweni and Aedirnian troops actually fought, and they need to find 3 objects which are symbolic of the battle to be able to lift the curse. Now, Iorveth enters, offering his support and that of his archers to Saskia, who it's clear he places a lot of hope in. She is the perfect monarch that he mentioned earlier, and it's easy to see why he puts so much trust in her. She is noble, pure, and charismatic, even succeeding in convincing everyone to accept Iorveth despite their initial reservations. While drinking a toast, unfortunately, she's poisoned and collapses, creating chaos in Vergen. Now, Philippa reveals that she is dying and that the only cure is a special herb called an Immortelle, a rose of remembrance, a huge quantity of magical power in the form of an artifact, and royal blood. Geralt begins his quest by retrieving an Immortelle. With the help of Zoltan and a band of dwarves, he fights his way through monster-infested mines to find the healing herb. Speaking to Philippa, Geralt reveals that Triss actually has a Rose of Remembrance herself and insists that they must find her. Philippa offers to use a spell to locate Triss, but first we'll need an item that's close to her. Now, Geralt follows clues given by Philippa and interrogates a drunken dwarf overheard telling stories of a red-headed woman that fell from the sky. The dwarf tells Geralt that Triss was kidnapped by a troll. Upon interrogating the troll, Geralt learns that she escaped and that her handkerchief was taken by his wife, after a jealous lover's spat, effectively. Geralt saves her from a band of Kaedwenian mercenaries, and she gives him the handkerchief in her gratitude. Using this, Philippa locates Triss's presence on the other side of the mist, in the midst of the Kaedwenian camp. Aided by Philippa, Geralt travels through the mist. He unexpectedly meets Vernon Roche, who is still angry at him for siding with Iorveth, but Geralt asks for Roche's help, and though he is reluctant at first, he does give in after Geralt reminds him of his quest to stop Letho and also bring justice to Foltest's murderer. He tells the Witcher of a secret passageway through a whore's camp. Now, after bribing the mistress, Geralt finds the entrance and he sneaks through it. But as he's getting on the other side, he stumbles across a dead body, and he actually finds a strange figurine on it. which is very strange. But he picks it up and collects it. And then, sadly, as he's trying to make his way through to the camp, Geralt is actually captured on the outskirts of the Nilfgaardian camp and is interrogated by the ambassador to Redania. He discovers that Triss is being kidnapped within the form of a figurine and is unable to rescue her. Now, Geralt is nearly executed, though he is rescued just in time by Vernon Roche. Breaking into the Kaedweni camp, with Roche's help, he actually sneaks into King Hanselt's tent and takes a drop of blood at sword point, which is the second item that's needed to cure Saskia, that of royal blood. He offers to lift the mist in return for safe passage out of the camp. And Henselt agrees. After returning to Philippa and giving her the royal blood and the Rose of Remembrance, which was found in the outer shell of the figure, because Triss's figure was hidden within, so he finds it in the outer shell. Geralt continues his quest by looking for the final element to the cure, an artifact of power, which he does ultimately find within a harpy nest, trapped in a dreamstone, the dreamstone of a dragon. So harpies basically collect dreams, and they've actually collected one from a dragon, which is very curious. Now, returning all four parts of the cure to Philippa, she finally cures Saskia using a combination of alchemy and magic. Now that Saskia is healed and the people of Vergen have their leader back, Geralt lifts the curse by collecting and presenting 3 objects connected to the battle. In order to lift the curse, Geralt must reenact key moments from the battle, the taking of the enemy standard, dodging a hail of arrows to get reinforcements, and a final battle between 2 of its strongest generals, a guy called Selkirk of Gullet and Vandergrift. The mist is lifted, and the stage is set for a confrontation between King Henselt's forces and Saskia's troops, and thus begins the siege of Vergen. Now, Geralt plays a major role in the defense of Vergen, helping to drop hot oil onto the enemy troops below and defending its walls. Surviving 2 waves of attacks, Geralt rushes with Saskia to the Dwarven mines to guard the tunnels under the keep from invasion. Finding Kaedwenian troops there, Geralt soon dispatches them, but is knocked unconscious by Henselt's personal mage called Deathmold. Now, just when all seems lost, Saskia suddenly begins to glow and turns into a huge golden dragon. It's the same dragon that actually attacked Geralt at La Valette Castle. Now, Saskia reveals her secret to Geralt and asks him to keep it hidden, fearing the villagers' reaction if they discovered she was a dragon, believing it would divide their camp and cause dispute and turmoil. Returning to the city walls, Saskia gives a rousing speech to the scared villagers, and she reminds them of what the future may hold should Henselt win, death and slavery. She reminds them of the ideals that they fight for, freedom and equality, and a future where Upper Erden can be independent and humans and non-humans live in peace. The battle resumes, and Geralt, Zoltan, and Saskia defend the walls. Philippa fights Henselt's mage, and Iorvith provides support, from his archers from above. Henselt is defeated and ultimately surrenders, agreeing to the execution of his mage Deathmold as a war criminal and recognizing Saskia's claim to become Queen of Vergen and Upper Erden's right to become a fully independent state separate from the rest of Erden. Upon following Philippa and Saskia, they actually see the 2 women suddenly disappear through a portal. From investigating Philippa's home, they learn that the sorceress has actually subjugated Saskia's mind by using the Rose of Remembrance, and now has control over a very powerful dragon, which she intends to unleash to her advantage at the summit of the Council and Conclave, which is going to take place in a place called Loch Muin, where the most powerful mages, sorcerers, and monarchs of the Northern Kingdoms will be gathered. So, suffice to say, not good. Saying farewell to Zoltan and Dandelion, who remain in Vergen, Iorvith and Geralt actually travel to Loch Muin, hoping to stop Philippa Eilhardt's plans. And that's the end of chapter 2. At the beginning of chapter 3, we see Triss being freed from the spell that binds her by a Nilfgaardian sorceress. Now, she's taken hostage by the Nilfgaardian ambassador, and we assume that she is tortured and interrogated. The scene then cuts to Geralt and Iorveth as they sneak into Loch Moraine in search of Philippa Eilhart. Overhearing a conversation between two guards talking about King Radovid and his decision to throw Philippa in the dungeon, Geralt is left with his third choice, and perhaps his most difficult one. Does he rescue Triss Merigold from torture and perhaps death, or does he rescue Philippa Eilhart? Now, although my Geralt did care deeply for Triss and he did want to rescue her desperately, he decided that his duty as a witcher actually must come first, and that if Philippa was to die, Saskia would never be freed from her mind control, and decided that sorceresses could not be allowed to control a powerful dragon, which could tip the scale of power in the region dangerously. Now, sneaking into the prison, Geralt overhears a conversation between King Radovid of Redania and Philippa Eilhart. Now, Radovid reveals that he had Triss tortured, who revealed to him the existence of a secret society called the Lodge of Sorceresses. Now, she admitted to him that these sorceresses had ordered Letho to assassinate several kings, including Foltest and Demavend, and Radovid accuses her of killing his father and of plotting to kill him too. She protests this accusation vehemently, but she's unable to avoid the torture that Radovid has planned for her, and as her eyes are being gouged out with a spoon, she screams in agony. Now, Geralt rushes into the prison, dispatches the guards, and rescues Philippa. While escorting her to safety with Iorveth's help, she reveals that she actually has enchanted a special dagger capable of freeing Saskia from the spell, and leads Geralt and Iorveth to a magical chest that turns out to be a trap. Using the distraction to advantage, she escapes, leaving Geralt to face the monster, protecting the chest alone. Defeating it, Geralt recovers the dagger, but sadly Philippa has disappeared. She's gone, and that's the last that we see of her in The Witcher 2, so it'll be interesting to see if she reappears in the third game and what's become of her. Now, rushing to the talks, Iorveth and Geralt witness the negotiations, and the talks reveal that Prince Stennis has actually crowned himself King of Aedirn. Now, Saskia is there too, and she argues that the free people of Upper Aedirn do not recognize his claim, and that they will remain independent and free, ruled by Queen Saskia. She speaks in favour of reinstituting the council and the conclave of mages and sorceresses, but suddenly the talks are interrupted as the Nilfgaardian ambassador storms into the talks with Letho in chains. Now, Letho reveals the plot of the Lodge of Sorceresses, and he also names Philippa Eilhart and Sheila de Tanzaville as accomplices. Saskia attacks them in the form of a dragon, protecting Sheila de Tanzaville, and Geralt faces the dragon, dodging her fire attacks as he rushes to catch Sheila de Tanzaville before she can escape. Gloating at Geralt, she attempts to use a megascope to teleport away, but as the machine begins to spark and glow orange, it's clear that it has been sabotaged. And here is where Geralt faces his fourth choice. Now, he has a choice. Leave the corrupt crystal inside the machine and allow Sheila to die, or remove the crystal and save her life. Now, figuring that she had information potentially useful to his mission, my Geralt decided to spare her, and in gratitude she tells him of Letho's betrayal and his collaboration with Nilfgaard, who wished to weaken the northern kingdoms in preparation for an invasion. She finishes by telling Geralt to go south to Nilfgaard, where he will find Yennefer, before she vanishes. Now, with Sheila gone, Saskia goes wild and Geralt is left to fight her. He fights the dragon, jumping onto her back and forcing her to the ground. Impaled on a tree branch, Geralt then uses the sword to break the spell, binding her to Philippa. Now, having regained her memory, Saskia returns to Vergen, intent on ruling and creating a place of hope and peace for non-humans and outcasts. And this is the end of chapter 3. Finally, the story of the second game closes with an epilogue. Now, Geralt begins the epilogue by confronting Letho, and we are asked now to make our fifth and final choice. We can either let Letho go or kill him. Now, I decided first to speak to Letho, and he revealed how he had helped Yennefer after my death. He recounts how, after Geralt had sacrificed himself to save Yennefer from the Wild Hunt, she was left vulnerable and weak, suffering from amnesia like Geralt. So it's curious to see whether the Yennefer that we meet in The Witcher 3 remembers Geralt, or whether again she has amnesia. Now, as a powerful sorceress, this makes her potentially very, very dangerous. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens there. Now, Letho reveals to Geralt how he and the other witches had actually protected Yennefer until they were ultimately separated in Nilfgaard. And it does look like, Geralt is going to be traveling into Nilfgaard through this sort of marching army in the third game. Now, Letho also explains to Geralt his motivations behind the assassinations, and that he agreed to help Nilfgaard weaken the Northern Kingdoms in exchange for support in rebuilding the Witches' School of the Viper, which is a very important goal given the dwindling numbers of the Witchers. Now, my Geralt ultimately took pity on Letho and decided to allow him to leave with his life. Finally, through the epilogue, we see the consequences of our choices. We witness King Radovid as he begins his witch hunts. Now, distrust and hate have spread throughout the Northern Kingdoms as, common folk turn against mages, sorceresses, and even witches, and we witness the terrible torture and burning of anyone with magical skill. We learn that Flotsam has become a military base, and the Pontar Valley and Vergen have become a promised land for outcasts. And we finally learn that Temeria has been divided between King Radovid and King Henselt. Finally, in the closing scene, we see the black troops of Nilfgaard as they invade the north, and this all sets the scene for the start of The Witcher 3. So there you have it. That is the main story of the second game. I do apologize, guys. This video is much longer than I was originally anticipating. I was hoping to do this in a 20-minute video, but there is so much content within the second game that you really do need to know to understand The Witcher 3. So I hope you guys didn't mind that I did really go into detail with this, and I hope you guys were able to follow it as you were going along. So I hope you guys found this video useful and that it has prepared you for The Witcher 3. And as I said, I've tried to cover all the major plot points and choices that you need to know for the third game. Now, if you have any further questions, please feel free to drop them in the comment section below. And as always, I will do my best to answer them. Alright guys and girls, well thanks so much for tuning in to watch this video. If you did enjoy it, please hit that like button to show your support as always. Take care guys and girls, and as always, happy gaming! Yeah. Revealing himself to be a witcher, and he then jumps out of the window and escapes with the help of a group of Scoia'tael in a boat. Geralt is left hunched over the dead body of King Foltest, carrying, holding a bloody sword, and of course he's then arrested and thrown into prison, and the flashback pretty much ends there. After hearing Geralt's story, Vernon ultimately believes his innocence and agrees to help Geralt escape and find the true Kingslayer. Roach offers Geralt some food and drink to sort of replenish his energy, and this actually triggers a flashback as Geralt regains some of his lost memory. Now, just so you guys know, within this video, I'm not going to really talk about these flashbacks in too much detail. I am actually planning to sort of incorporate all of these flashbacks in a separate video where I'm going to compile them together and sort of make a compilation video so you guys will be able to watch them. Hey guys and girls, how's it going? So here is my second Witcher video. This one is on the main story of The Witcher 2. Now there are 5 key choices from the second game that can change the overall storyline quite significantly. As these are pretty crucial, I'll be highlighting and explaining the choices available and the decisions I made, plus the consequences when we get to them. As some of you may already know, CD Projekt Red have included a way for you to incorporate these decisions into The Witcher 3, and they have said that this will be done through an interrogation scene at the start of the third game. Okay, so let's get into the main storyline. So The Witcher 2 is set 1 month after the end of the first game. Now the game starts with Geralt imprisoned in La Valette dungeon. After receiving a beating from the guards, he is interrogated by a guy called Vernon Roche. Now, Vernon Roche is the commander of the Blue Stripes, and these are basically Temeria's special forces. Now, we learn very quickly early on that Geralt has been arrested for the murder of King Foltest, and during the course of the prologue, he pretty much recounts the events of the battle leading to Foltest's death in an attempt to prove his innocence. Now, the flashback starts with Geralt waking up in a tent next to a very naked Triss Merigold. Now, they are interrupted by a very flustered soldier, and Geralt is summoned to Foltest's side as his own personal Witcher bodyguard and lucky charm during the battle. Now, attacking the castle in a siege tower, Geralt storms the castle wall, fighting his way through La Valette Knights while obviously continually protecting the king's back. The king and Foltest then face a guy called Aryan La Valette, and this is where your first choice will happen. Geralt sneaks past the soldiers and faces Aryan alone, and it is here that he has a choice. Kill Aryan by challenging him to a duel, kill Aryan's guards and then kill Aryan himself, or spare his life. Now, to explain who Aryan La Valette is a noble youth who is very honourable and is effectively fighting King Foltest to protect the honour of his mother and his siblings. Now, Foltest had actually slept with his mother, who had given birth to 2 bastard children, and then was pretty much abandoned and her honour besmirched and just ruined by these events. Now, Aryan is very angry at Foltest, and he's angry that Foltest is trying to claim these 2 children now as his heirs, because, you know, Foltest has no longer has any heirs as a result of Princess Ada dying. Now, feeling sympathetic to Aryan, my Geralt pretty much took pity on him and convinced him to surrender, thus saving his own life and that of his soldiers. Now, as Geralt and Vernon Roche and the king make their way to the monastery, which is where the children are being kept safe, they are unexpectedly attacked by a dragon. This separates Roche from Geralt and Foltest, and from this point on, Geralt basically tells how the king died. So Geralt helps carry the king to safety, and he hurts the dragon with his silver sword, which causes the dragon to fly off, but sadly Geralt loses his sword in the process. They then find the children, who is being protected by a blind monk. Now, Foltest embraces his children, and Geralt looks away, I think a little embarrassed, and he just looks away into a window, trying to give the king a bit of privacy as he tries to reconnect with his children. Unfortunately, Geralt notices too late that the monk is not what he appears, and as he runs towards the king, he fails to stop the assassin who slits Foltest's throat. The assassin then removes his disguise